Welcome to Town Square Sampler. In a small town, it's the people, the family, the relatives, and friends that you associate with that bring back fond memories. In my hometown of Zelienople, Pennsylvania, my two grandmothers warmed my heart. Now, my sisters tell me that I'm much like Grandma Nagel. Well, here she is with Papa and my father just after landing on Ellis Island from Germany in 1929. Well, I adored her, but she didn't need to give me her nose. And this is Mom Drischel with Pap, her husband. Now, she was a farm girl who moved to Harmony, and we'd walk those 2 miles just for a piece of her fresh baked bread. To remember all of our grandmas, Grandmother's Choice is the block we'll be sewing today. Sue Bouchard made this one with 12 blocks set on point, and there's a fun trick to it. Similar to Grandmother's Choice is Ducks and Ducklings. Loretta Smith made this one in reproduction 1930s fabrics. Well, both of my grandmothers raised ducks and chickens. So the block is also called Hens and Chickens. So let's give this technique a try and see what all the squawking is about. It's spring on Town Square. My sister Patty made this quilt, and I love the way she has the angels with the garland of flowers between the two of them. Beautiful sky blue hovering over the main street. Now we're ready to do the Ducks and Ducklings row, which is the bottom row in the quilt. And because it's spring, it's down here in the ground, so it's the green background fabric, and we used a large-scale floral print. It almost looks like a flower garden right there. Now, if this is the duck, this piece right here has to be the duckling. Well, I'm excited that it's the bottom row in the bottom half of the quilt because we have already done the maple leaf row with the triangle piece squares and this row with Edna's pinwheel. It looks like a picket fence running along there. Now, if you're doing the fall or the summer, both of those pieces use the ground or the green as the background. But if you're doing winter, remember the winter quilt. This is what it looks like right here because the bottom half actually uses the white as the snow for the background. This is the bottom row right here, the Duck and Ducklings row, and I actually worked on one. It was so much fun, it made me feel like Christmas and winter because this is the block itself, and it has the triangle piece squares right here in the corner, the large green square. This corner comes from the very same technique that we learned the last time on the maple leaf, and it's a 6-inch square of white, right sides together with a 6-inch of the red. Just let me show you how to do this. Now, this is the 6-inch square for the ground and then the medium triangle for the corner. You put them right sides together, make 3 sets just like this, draw an X corner to corner, and then sew a 1/4 inch on both sides of the diagonal line. You remember I showed you last time. So then take it and cut it in half, both directions, and then in the diagonal line. So you literally cut it into 8 triangles, press them open, and square them up to 2.5 inches. Now we're ready to go on. The next piece that you need to cut is a 2.5 inch by 3 1/4 inch ground piece, and it looks like this. Let me pull them real close. Line up the 2 pieces, and you place the dark of the triangle, pointing it down towards you. This is the 2.5 by 3 1/4 inch rectangle. Now for each one, you're going to need to have 4 of these. Each block you have 4. So flip it right sides together. Get that lined up along there. You know, actually I found out that I prefer to do a scant 1/4 inch seam on this. Actually, I think a scant corner works better. Okay, so take the second one, flip it right sides together, and you would just go ahead and assembly line sew the whole set of these one after the other. Now, when you're done with these pieces, you want to put them so that the triangle is on the top. set the seam open so that when you press it, the seam is right behind the triangle. That was magical, wasn't it? Okay, so now you have the triangle, the seam right there. Take two of these and place them in this order. You actually want to have this space right in the middle. We're going to make two pieces for the block right now. We're working with two pieces. So take these pieces, flip them right sides together, get them lined up, and just zip right on down there with that scant 1/4 inch seam. Hold that seam flat. You have to see where I put my stiletto. I must have dropped it off the table. Now, once you have sewn this seam, take right in between the two seams right here and just do a little clip. Just clip it right in half, right in the middle, right up to the stitching. And then take that and press it. If you put it down on your pressing mat, wrong side up, then you'll get it exactly right. So let's just get it like this. And it just naturally, the seams lay naturally. So we're going to press seams in one direction, then turn it around and press them in the second. So they split right in the middle. Now, the next part is the part that you're going to say, why didn't I think of that? This piece should measure 4.5 inches by 5 1/4. I'm just going to do a little check on it. 4.5 by 5 1/4. And if that's correct, you can go on. Take that large scale piece. Right now we want to add the large scale to it. We'll be making two of the corner pieces. Take and place them right sides together. And they actually should line up and be the same size. Oh, looking pretty good. Okay, you need to have a ruler that has a diagonal line on it. My 6 by 12 ruler works great for that. Place it so that the diagonal line or the 45-degree line just goes right along the side, and then the edge of the ruler just tips right up to that point. So you want to draw one line along there, turn on the second side, place the 45-degree line right along the edge, and make the edge of the ruler come right up to that stitching. Ooh, perfect. Whoa, if you can take a good look at that, how they cut right through there. Looks exactly right. Now, you want to have your needle centered. You want to stitch right on that line. And just drop your needle right on there. Hold your threads. Stitch right along. And then when you get down to the bottom, you could assembly line sew. But since I only have the one here, I'm just going to turn it around and drop my needle right on the line and stitch the second time, corner to corner. Once you have that done, just take a look and you can see how that crosses right through there. Perfect. Now, let's just take the ruler and the cutter. Check the other side. Yep, looks good. So we'll just take the ruler, cutter, line up the ruler so that it goes right down through the center of them and cut them into two pieces. I have a second one already. Let me just pull this one up. Got those lines drawn on there. Cut right down through. So, are you ready for the magic now? So just take these, drop them with the fabric that's the large triangle on the top, set that seam, and lift it up and over, and oh my gosh, I have a perfect unit. Perfect unit ready to go. So for one block, you're just going to press open 4 of them, set the seam, press it open, and actually, you may not need to square these up, but if you want to check, these pieces should measure 4.5 inches. So let's just see. Right here, I'm going to take and trim off this part, little tip. This meets perfectly right there on the corners, looking good. So let's take and just see if we can lay out a whole block. There's one there. And each time you want to just trim off those little points. That's going to go there like this and like this. So out of 2 sets, you actually get all 4 of the corner triangles. Perfect. Now, the next unit you need is a 2.5-inch square that's the same fabric as the corner triangles. Place them right in the middle like this. Now, if that's 2.5 inches square, this has got to be 2.5 inches by the size of the block, which is 4.5. This is going to be a quiz in the end. You're going to know all of these measurements. Just lay them out like that. And then all we need to do is just sew them together top to bottom. So I'll just take and flip the middle row right sides together to the bottom row. And let me just slip them right over here so I can go continuously right down. Now, if you think you didn't do that quite perfectly, you know, whenever you sew this together, your 4.5-inch strips will help you get that all lined up. So at the top, just anchor it. And if you like to backstitch, go ahead and backstitch right in the beginning. Pull those pieces together and just take the middle row and slip right behind into this one. And then the last row. And actually this you'll just assembly line sew over and over again as well. Now without clipping the threads in between, just keep them chained together. This row gets opened up, the middle row gets opened up, and you're just going to flip the third row right onto it. Now the interesting thing about this block is that it's been known by so many different names. You know that Ruth Finley actually came up with 7 different names. She said there's 7 different names for this block. She said, oh yes, it's known as Duck and Ducklings. It's known as corn and beans, and also hen and chicks. Well, then Carrie Hall said, yeah, those are good. I like all 3 of those. But it's also known as Handy Andy or Shoe Fly. So there's a ton of different names. And oh, not to mention, Nancy Cabot said, Fox and Geese. And Carrie Sexton said, Goose Chase. Great names. So now it's hung together by its vertical rows, top to bottom. All you need to just flip it the opposite way, and then right here at the seams in the middle, you're going to be pushing them in opposite directions, always pressing the seams towards the lattice. This way and this direction. Well, this is how you do the Ducks and Ducklings block. Why don't I get Grandmother's Choice ready to show you? Once you have your block sewn together, then press it from the back side, pushing the seams in towards the interior lattice. Well, I'm sewing my row together, and I'm putting 2.5-inch by 10.5-inch lattice pieces in between each block. Now the block should actually measure around 10.5 inches. Oh, that would be great if it was 10.5 inches. And right as the very last strip, I'm adding a strip that is 10.5 by 3.5. I'm sewing it from the wrong side so that I can keep all those seams flat. Don't twist them right at the very end. Now you want to have that 3.5-inch strip at the beginning of the row and at the end of the row. We'll put them on your pressing mat. They're all assembly line sewn together. And just set that lattice seam open and press right into the lattice so that the seams are right behind the lattice. Just kind of move those along here, set and bring it along there. Gosh, this feels so great. We're getting this whole row finished. Now, once you have all of the blocks with the lattice in between, then you want to cut them apart and sew them back together again with that 2.5-inch lattice strip in the middle. Let me find the one that has the wider piece on the outside. Here's the 3.5-inch piece. Let me turn this one around, and you're just going to line them up. Get them sewn back together. Oh, it is looking great. Something like this in a row. Now, have you been keeping up with me? Have you been making your row each time? And then you're laying your rows out and you're going, these aren't the same length. What am I going to do? Not to worry, because the first row that we made is the 4-patch row. And this is the row that should determine the length of all of your rows. Once you make the 4-patch row, then the second row that we did is Edna's pinwheel. Now, it could be exactly the same length. It should be, but if you need to put a little spacer right out here, it's not going to cause a problem. Because if you notice, there was a 2.5-inch spacer added right to the maple leaf, and it was just trimmed off. Right here is that 3.5-inch spacer we added, and then that'll just be trimmed up to match all of the rows. And then there's 2.5-inch dividers in between each one of the rows. Trust me, this quilt is going to go together. Grandmother's Choice is twice as fast and maybe twice as fun. Let's take a look. Now this was the Ducks and Ducklings block that we did with the triangle piece square right in the corner. But then with the very same fabrics, this is Grandmother's Choice, and the only difference is that it's a square in the corners instead of the piece square. And it actually comes from this funky looking 4-patch. It looks like we didn't quite match that piece right in the middle, but that's how you do it. It'll be a lot of fun. Now this is the sample that I want to make. I want to use this rose color and this background for the square in the corners. It comes from strips. 2.5-inch strips of medium and 3 1/4-inch strip in the background. Sew those pieces right sides together, 1/4-inch seam, press the seam to the dark side, and then line them up right sides together. Ooh, kind of don't even have a seam to match, but you should match the outside edges. And then take your 6x12 and cut this into 2.5-inch segments. Sort of reminds me of the 4-patch. Okay, and then once you have your 2.5-inch segments cut, it's just a 1/4-inch seam. You could use that scant quarter if you'd like, right along there, but just hold that seam flat as you stitch across it, match up the outside edges. Oh, I found my stiletto, and it's so much easier to match. And then just as we did with the triangles, right here in the middle where the 2 seams join together, right here where the 2 seams are, I'm just going to take a snip up to the stitching so that I can take that seam, and then in the other piece I have already done, you can press it flat. One seam going in this direction, one seam going in the other. And then the next step is just like Duck and Ducklings. Take your large triangle fabric. It is the same size piece, 4.5 by 5 1/4. These 2 pieces should be the same size. Whoop, well, that's a good start. Okay, now let's just turn them over. Remember how we took the 6x12 with the 45-degree line on it. Okay, I'm going to take the 45-degree line and line it up with the side and just kind of inch that over. So the tip of the ruler is right here at the point, and it just passes right through those stitches. See if I can get that marked that way and that way. Okay, one diagonal line, completely turn the block around. Once again, the 45 right at the tip and right at the stitch here, looking good. And you just mark it along there. This should look familiar to you. This is exactly what we did before. And then you just stitch on the line. And it's best if you start on the right line, zoom right down, turn around, and then back up on the second so that you actually just kind of cross right through those stitches. And then once you have your stitching done, cut it in half in the middle. And if we're lucky, it should be about a 1/2-inch seam right on both sides. Let's take a look. See how we did with this one. Now this is going fast. You have to agree. Okay, set the seam with the largest triangle on the top. Lift it up. Press the seam so that it's behind the largest triangle. Second piece, lift it up and press it open. These are pretty amazing pieces. That's all I can say. So once again, we've got that great crisp point right there. All you need to do is just cut off those corners on the seam, trim those off, and just as we did on the other one, the very center is a 2.5-inch square, and then take these pieces and turn them so that the large triangle turns in towards the center on each one of them. Actually, this piece looks like a flower garden too, doesn't it? Okay, so that's the 4 units, and then the outside pieces are exactly the same. 2.5 inch by 4.5 inch interior lattice pieces to fill that out. Ooh, that is beautiful. We had fun at Grandpa's farm. Now you can have fun. Make 5 blocks and sew them together into a row for your town square sampler, or make 12 blocks and sew them into a lap robe. Oh, it is just great. Now, this is how you do it. Take your blocks and set them on point, 3 across and 4 down. And then if your blocks were 10.5 inches in size, cut 10.5 inch squares for the center part of the quilt. Now the sides and the top and bottom come from 3 large 15.5 inch squares. Cut those into 4s on both diagonals, and then they go right into this part. That way the bias is in the middle, straight on the outside edge. The corners come from 2 8-inch squares. Just cut them once on one diagonal, and that is going to fit right in there perfectly. We'll sew your whole top together and then go on to your border. Oh, the border is lots of fun. Take 2.5 inch strips, piece them together, make one big long piece that goes the whole way around the quilt, and then cut so you have 4 pieces the same size as the quilt top. And then those little corner patches are just extra pieces that you made right from the block. You're going to attach that right onto the top and the bottom strips, and then you can just sew it right to your quilt. Oh, this grandmother's choice, just so much fun. Just mention grandma and quilts in the same sentence, and we get warm and fuzzy feelings. I found 35 quilt patterns with the word grandmother included in the name. Now you may recognize these quilts by other names, but this one is commonly known as Dresden plate. Prairie Farmer called it grandmother's sunbonnet or grandmother's sunburst. And in this beautiful peach color, it could be a sunburst. Well, Florence Leganke designed this quilt in 1928 and named it Grandmother's Garden Quilt. My sister Patty made it just recently with the piece baskets filled with flowers grandmother loved. And the flowers look like Grandma just picked them. Well, this one is one we easily recognize as Grandmother's Flower Garden. It was one of the most popular patterns made during the 1930s. Now this pattern has also been referred to as Martha Washington's Flower Garden or Martha Washington's Rose Garden. Well, what beautiful green paths she had to meander among her flowers. Ruby McKim identified this popular one as Grandmother's Fan. Well, that's logical. Now this one has a twist to it. Rick-rack edges are turned under on the curves. Well, this one looks like a snowball to us, but it was also called Grandmother Shorts Quilt. And not to let anyone out, it's also known as Aunt Patty's favorite. May you share your quilting with Grandma or with someone you love.